on 95.3 FM in Windhoek, Desert Radio. The Bold Voice.
And it is that time that we do get into our next conversation of the day. We are now joined in studio by CRAN Chief Executive Officer, that's Emilia Nghikembua, who has also served as the former head legal advice, where she was responsible for corporate advice, legislative drafting, sector reform, regulatory compliance, enforcement, adjudication, and litigation. She also served as acting head legal service, responsible for corporate advice, legislative drafting, sector reform, regulatory compliance, enforcement, adjudication, litigation, and a lecturer in the Department of Commercial Law, Faculty of Law. She says her vision is to formulate a framework that will help Namibia realize the objectives of the fourth industrial revolution. Emilia, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you this fine morning?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm very, very well. Now, of course, we brought you here, just to understand and find out what it is you do, but also to get to know you a bit. Who is the person behind the CEO's chair and office? So I hope you're ready to just dive a little bit into that. A question that Alana likes asking our guests usually when they come in is, just to get to know you a bit, is to ask what your origin story is. Who is Emilia? Where did you grow up? How was your childhood like? And how has that, of course, impacted you to be who you are today?
Okay.
So I guess you can start with that.
All right. So thank you very much for having me. I grew up in the northern parts of Namibia. I grew up in Orongo. It was an agricultural college at the time, but I think it's one of the UNAM campuses now. I attended my primary school at Erundu Primary School. I understand it's also a senior secondary school now. A lot has changed. After that, I went to Oshigampo High School. That's where I did my high school up to grade 12. From there, I then went to the University of Namibia. I'm a trained lawyer by profession, so I did a BUris degree, I did a Bachelor of Laws, and I did a Master's of Laws at the University of Namibia. Later, I went to the University of the Witwatersrand, where I did a Master's in ICT Policy and Regulation.
Wow.
I think my background has always been one where we were prepared for a bigger world out there. I think that's one thing that my parents always encouraged, that there was a world much bigger than where we were, and we were really prepared to go into that world and make a space for ourselves. Yeah.
And Emilia, talk to us about, what you thought you wanted to do in your childhood. We have really wild dreams when we're kids. That doesn't necessarily become our reality or our career path as we get older, but sometimes it does. So what did you want to do, or what did you think you were going to do when you were a child?
When I was a child, I thought I was going to be a journalist or a media presenter. I remember I used to watch, I think it was a music show. It was Penduka, I think. And there was a lady there that always used to present, and I would always look at her and like, wow, I really, really want to be that. But obviously, I think as you grow, things change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, look, especially your post-high school career has also been very, academically inclined. I mean, you're getting your masters and all of that. So were you always so, focused on academics in your younger years, or did you balance between sports and, sort of other extracurricular activities? How was that like?
I think when I was in high school, I did a bit of sports, but when I moved on to varsity, I sort of became somewhat of a book nerd because I think because of the nature of the course that I studied, law is very, very taxing. It's volumes and volumes of reading, so I think that really kept me confined to the walls of the library.
So does that mean we're bookworms still now? Are you reading any books perhaps?
Yes, I'm reading, is it Find Me by Viola Davis.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Wow,
latest
okay.
read.
Yeah, I've heard that's a really good one. Comes highly
It
recommended.
is very, very good. It's very, what I like about it, it's very, very authentic, because a lot of times when you look at people that are successful, you think they have always been successful. But she really demonstrates how to rise above your circumstances and just become a better version of yourself. So it's a good book.
Definitely. I'm going to pick up a copy and make sure to read that.
Yeah.
And then, Emilia, before we, delve into talking about your work and your career, I'm curious to know, away from the boardroom and, the hustles of the corporate circles that you're in, what do you get up to? What are those things that you say are markers of your identity?
I think I do a lot of reading, like I said. I'm not a very socially outgoing type of person,
Okay.
but I do catch up with my friends and my family here and there. But a lot of time, I also spend a lot of time doing spiritual activities, whether it's in church or going out and giving out to communities. So I also spend a lot of time doing that.
Absolutely.
And as a woman who's made significant influence in the corporate world in the country, just talk to us about what your philosophy for upscaling other women are or is, just to follow your similar trajectory and perhaps make sure that other women are essentially ma- getting it. Well, okay, let's just put it essentially. What is your philosophy for upscaling other women in the corporate sector, in the corporate world?
Okay. I think my philosophy is really twofold. Firstly is that you need to sort of make up your mind about what space do you want to occupy in this world? What space do you want to occupy in the corporate world? And then you need to prepare yourself to occupy that space. Is it that you need qualifications? Is it that you need to improve on your soft skills? So you really need to be deliberate about where you want to go and how you're going to get there. And then secondly, which I also find most importantly, is your belief system. You cannot become that which you don't believe, or you cannot become that which you criticize. You find there's a lot of people, they spend a lot of time on saying, oh, that one, she only got there because of this and that. So you can't become that which you fight. So you must really have a mindset that allows you to occupy the space that you would like to occupy, because if your mindset is fighting what you want to become, then you're definitely not going to become that. Then I think the other thing is also try and learn from people who are there, try and honor people who have made it, but also try and learn from them. What is it that you did? How do they behave? What is it that they do? And really just have a lifestyle that is deliberate in helping you occupy that space.
Yeah. And then would you say, I mean, there's this notion obviously that, many industries are run by men, that it's usually male dominated. Would you say that right now as it stands, the situation for women, especially in a corporate environment, is getting better? It's getting, at the very least, more equal in terms of opportunities to get to, the highest levels of the corporate seats? Or are there still struggles? Are there still sort of hurdles that women have to go through harder than men in order to just rise up the corporate ladder?
Obviously, I think things are somewhat improving. We are not where we were, let's say, maybe 10 or 20 years ago. But I think it's still very difficult for women to get into the corporate world, and it's even more difficult once you're there just to sort of sustain yourself, because there is this notion that women don't really belong. So when you are found around the table, then it's sort of, you firstly need to justify that you belong there before you can then contribute or put out the value that you are giving to whoever is there. So I think a lot has been done, especially through the affirmative action laws and all of that, but there is still room for improvement just to make sure that women receive that type of representation that they need within the corporate space.
And, we hear often about, these challenges that women experience as they're climbing corporate ladders, as they're breaking glass ceilings. And I'm sure that you are privy to those as well, and that you've experienced some in your career so far. So how do you overcome some of these challenges? How do you push through them?
I think firstly, I try not to impose barriers on myself, because society already imposes barriers on you as a woman. So I try not to impose those barriers on myself. And secondly, I try to always be prepared. I tell myself the reason why I was appointed is not because I am a woman, but it's because I am competent to do the job. So I try to always be prepared, so much so that when you sit around a table and you speak, people don't really care whether you're a man or a woman. People care about what value can you add. So you must always be prepared, and when you speak, they must hold on to every word you say. You must be good at what you do. You must study. You must uplift yourself. You must really know what you're doing all the time, especially because you are already fighting those barriers that they put on top of you. I mean, I go in boardrooms where sometimes people think I'm the secretary or I'm the PA to the CEO or whatever, because they don't know. But the moment you start engaging them and they see that you're a person of substance, you're a person of depth, you're a person that knows what you're doing, then they start to respect the work that you do. Yeah.
Definitely. And then I think let's move over just a little bit to, your work. You are with CRAN, and of course we have to use this opportunity to just talk about some CRAN related things. And I think perhaps we can start off with the, decision to introduce mandatory SIM registration, right? That's been something that we've been talking about now since it was announced, and just getting a better understanding of the importance of this. Perhaps just tell us, about that decision and why it was so important for CRAN to officially make that a requirement.
Okay, so the decision to not to regulate, but to register or to make SIM registration a mandatory requirement is actually to give effect to the provisions of the Communications Act, which came into force in 2011, and it requires that all SIMs must be registered, firstly, and then secondly, that once your SIM is registered, then there is certain information pertaining to your phone activities that also need to be registered. So for instance, which numbers you called, on which what do you call it, application you visited, and so forth. And that information must then also be stored for a period of 5 years. Now, the most important thing is also to say that SIM registration is basically something that is done in many countries. I think a lot of us who travel would know that if you go into certain countries, you would not be able to just buy a SIM. There's a process. You need to give your passport, the hotel where you are staying, and all of that. So it's a requirement. And the unfortunate thing for us as Namibia is that on the African continent, there's only 2 countries that have not had this as a mandatory requirement, and Namibia is one of them. And this is why we are excited that finally it's happening, so that we can also just get aligned with other countries on the African continent. From a global perspective, there is 157 countries who all have mandatory SIM registration. So the essence of the decision is really, one, to give effect to the law, but 2, to also just align ourselves to international and continental best practice.
Now, there are obviously split opinions about this. Some people are saying that, this invasion of privacy, all of that, but then there's also the element of fighting crime, right? So let's focus on that element and talk to us a bit about how this will be beneficial to the country in terms of fighting crime.
Okay. I think the most important thing is to understand that as it is currently, you would walk into a service station or into a supermarket, you'd buy a SIM, put it in your phone, and start sending Charmaine all sorts of messages, insulting her and all of that. That's the first occurrences. The second occurrences is we have people that have lost thousands and thousands of dollars through fraudulent activities. Send an e-wallet to this, do this, send your banking details to this, and all of that. And in both instances, nobody knows who this SIM belongs to. And this person, after they are done doing whatever they want to do, they simply take it out of their phone and chuck it away. We also have, sometimes you'll find people that would have disappeared from home, or people who would have been killed, and they were contacted by numbers, but nobody knows who this number belongs to. And this is why from an individual safety perspective, from a national safety perspective, SIM registration will assist in fighting crimes. Now, we know obviously that there has also been a lot of talks around the invasion to privacy. And what we would like to clarify is firstly that the Constitution of Namibia is very clear that privacy is not an absolute right, right? It's not like your right to life. Your right to life is absolute. You could have committed many heinous crimes. Nobody still has the right to take away that right from you. And this is why we don't have the death penalty. But the right to privacy comes with what we call limitations. And the Constitution is then saying, if it is in the public interest or if it is in the interest of national safety, that right to privacy can be limited. But what the Constitution then says is that it must still be subject to compliance with the law. And the law in this case would then be the National Central Intelligence Act as well as the Criminal Procedure Act. And both those laws then set out a process which says, so if you are suspected of having committed a crime, we are not just going to go and start telling your service provider to give us your data. No, we are going to go to a judge and ask the judge and say, we suspect that this person has committed a crime. This is the evidence around it. Can you please give us a warrant? And the judge or the magistrate must authorize that warrant, and then only with the warrant will the service provider release the information. So it's really balanced out in that manner.
And then when it comes to, fears around people's personal data, how is CRAN making sure that, personal data is not abused when SIM registration is implemented from, the point where your personal data is being input and then handed over to CRAN? What is the system in place to make sure that somewhere along that line somebody isn't taking your data to abuse it?
Okay. So the data does not come to CRAN. The data is stored by the operators.
Okay.
And the regulations are clear in terms of how the operators deal with that data. And the only time that they release the data is if there is a warrant that has been issued by the court. So both the regulations that were issued by the minister and the conditions that were imposed by CRAN are very clear in terms of how that data is being stored. Now, the one thing that I also want to say is that the new conditions and the regulations only make the registration and the storage of data mandatory. But the data is already being stored. All these years, it's already being stored. That's why if you go to your service provider and you say, I don't know why my bill is 500, or I don't know why I had 1 gig of data and now my data is stored. The service provider will print for you what we call an itemized bill, where they'll be able to show and say, okay, you had 1 gig, you visited this social media, you visited that one, you sent so many messages, and this is how it was utilized. It's already there. The only thing that happens now is that we make it mandatory.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm also interested to find out how this is going to be regulated, because even till now you still have many retail stores selling SIM cards, vendors selling SIM cards, and they're not asking for personal information, for personal data. So how is that going to be regulated, just in regards to this new particular law?
Okay. So the obligations in terms of the law are on the, what do you call them, the operators. Now, the retail stores and the service stations and all the other vendors are reselling for the operator. So the obligation has now been imposed on the operator to make sure that that relationship complies to the new requirements. So they have to revise those retail and resale agreements to make sure that regardless of who is disposing or who is retailing that SIM card, it is always registered. Yeah.
So then just to make it clear, let's say a telecommunications company sells their SIM cards in a service station. And if, for example, that service station is not complying by not getting that data so that the operator can store it, then at the end of the day, the onus is on the operator.
Yes.
And any penalty would be on the operator themselves. So they have to ensure that. Okay. All right. That actually makes it quite simple.
It does.
Because I was also curious about, just some of these vendors that sell and how that works.
Exactly.
Yeah, and this is why we are also busy now engaging the operators just to make sure that all those modalities
Not taken care of.
have been taken care of. Yeah.
And then just in closing, before we let you go, Emilia, I just want to hear from you perhaps a message to, young Namibians who want to go down your route, want to pursue the things that you've pursued, maybe not the same, but in similar ways. What message do you have, especially for that young child sitting somewhere where they believe they don't have what it takes to get to where you are? What is your message to them?
Okay. So the one thing that I always say is that what people need to take away from my story is not so much that I became CEO, because becoming CEO for me was the end product of a process.
Yeah.
And the process was one of identifying yourself. What is your purpose? Why are you here? And then identifying those things that you need to work on in order to manifest that purpose. So is it that you need to study? Is it soft skills? Do you need to go through coaching and mentoring and all of that? So and it's also a story of a lot of perseverance, a lot of patience, because along the way you would experience a lot of rejection, a lot of discrimination, a lot of many things would have happened along the way. So, but one would always remain focused because you know where you are going. You're sort of keeping your eye on the bigger goal. So I think for me, that is really my message for everybody, to identify their purpose and to be deliberate about making that purpose become a reality.
Absolutely.
Lovely.
Well, Emilia, thank you so much for making some time this morning to come into studio and have a chat with us and give us an opportunity to get to know you, your story, your journey, and where you are now.
Thank you so much for having me.